You know much about the way that a bride was betrothed to her husband. Maybe sometime we'll get to do a Passover and we'll see. But basically it was that you just didn't pick out a young lady and said, hey, you want to go to the local lion fight this week? No, you did it by the customs of that time. You saw a young lady and you said, wow, man, I believe she'd make a good wife. She's worth at least 5 camels and 2 ox and a couple of sheep. I tell you what, I'm going to write that down in a contract, and I'm going to take it to her father. And so he would find out who the girl was and take this contract to the father. And he would say, you know, I've seen your daughter in town, and boy, I'd like to marry her. You know, I'm marrying age, and the biological clock is ticking. Boy, I'd like to be married, and I'd like to have your daughter for a wife. Father said, what are you willing to give? Oh, here's the contract: 2 ox, 3 sheep, 5 camels, 4 bulls, 2 goats. You know, that's a pretty good deal. Why don't you come on over to the house? So the father would set up a meeting between this young man and his daughter. And he would say, daughter, this young man has desires to marry you, and he's given me a contract. And a cup of wine was poured and set before the young lady. And the father says, I approve of this contract. Daughter, here's the contract. Do you approve of it? She never said a word. She read the contract. And if she approved of it, she drank the cup. And from then on, she was betrothed to that young man. The young man was overjoyous. Boy, I'd like to get married. You know how young men are. I want to get married now. But no, there was something that had to be done. The young man had to go to his father's house and build on the father's house a bridal chamber. You see, it was forbidden by the law of Moses that when you married, you were not to leave your wife. You weren't to fight a war or anything for the first year. You stayed with your wife. You stayed in that bridegroom's chamber for a year. And so the young man would go back to the father and say, listen, I found a bride. Fine, get some lumber and get some nails, kid. You got to build a place. So the young man, he would hammer, and the father would come in every once in a while and inspect the place. You know, son, I know you're in a hurry to get married, but you know that 2x4 over there is going to fall down and hit your new bride right in the head. Now get the thing up right. Let's take time to do this thing right. One day the father walks in and said, son, you've done a good job. Go get your bride. He would gather his closest friends, and they still do this in Jerusalem. And in the midst of the night, they always do it in the night because it's a stealing away of the bride. He would come to the city, and his friends that he had would run into the city a little bit in front of him and said, behold, the bridegroom cometh. And she'd been waiting. It could have been 2 years. She's been waiting for that call. Behold, the bridegroom cometh. She rises because she was to have a lamp burning beside her bed with a reserve of oil. Sound familiar, doesn't it? She would trim the wick of the lamp that it would burn brightly. And she was always kept upstairs. Not downstairs, upstairs. They'd put a ladder up there, and it's still done by Jewish custom. Many of the Orthodox still do this today, and steal the bride out, and they run off and get married. Isn't it interesting that it was the cup that she drank that betrothed her to her bridegroom? He left for a period of time because he had to go and prepare a place for her, so that when he came for his bride and took her back, that he could take her into that chamber. But it was up to the father when the father would send the young man. And Jesus says, no man knows the hour that I come, only the Father. This whole thing, man, if we ever get a chance to come back and do Passover, it'll blow you away. Everything's established by pattern. There's no doubt about what the Word of God says. There's a time coming that Jesus is coming for the church. He'll come as a thief in the night, and those that don't have their lamps prepared and that oil in reserve are not going to go in. They're going to be left out of the kingdom, and they'll be standing on the outside of the bridal chamber saying, Lord, open to us. I don't know you. I'm in here with my bride. This is my honeymoon. Now get out of my face. I don't want to hear you anymore.